do this experiment, right? For 1 hour, don't check your phone.
The better we understand how our brain develops habits, the better we can dive into how do we fight, how do we not fight or fix, but how do we change our habits
Right.
to then be liturgies that then, and I think this is really kind of a neat part,
Purposeful.
that become purposeful. Hello and welcome to the Teaching the Faith at Home podcast, where we walk with parents as they're raising up children in the Christian faith so that they can be better equipped to preach, reach, and teach others about the salvation of Jesus. This is Pastor Andrew, and I'm Matt Mueller, and today I want to kick things off with a basic question for you, Pastor. What's your bedtime routine with your kids like at home?
Oh, lots of crying and snot. Bedtime routine, right? Every family has some routine that they do, and especially with littles, and Maria's just over 3. The twins are, I guess, going on 14 months now. And it's often, the basic outline is after doing all of the preparation for bed stuff, right? You got PJs, we've got going to potty and brushing our teeth and all that, right? Getting your final drink of water, all that stuff. We get on the couch together and we read through a Bible story, and we have a number of different Bible story books that we use, and we just kind of cycle through them. It's funny how we're getting through a couple of them like 5 or 6 times now, and so you know what to expect as you go. And they're starting to have their favorites. But you read just one of the stories, and depending on how things are going, right, because you have 3 kids and 2 parents, and everybody's fighting over laps and all that sort of stuff, sometimes we cut a story a little short, right? And we move along, but then we enter a time of prayer. And for our family, we started with just Lord's Prayer, but then just kind of connect to chapel, as Marie was going to be there to say Luther's evening prayer, because in chapel we say Luther's morning prayer. And so that's something that we say both Lord's Prayer and Luther's evening prayer, and then we sing a song or a hymn. And we have our favorite, right? You have the greatest hits. And then every once in a while, this is the pastor and me coming out, right? Oh, we've entered into this new season. We're going to pull out the hymnal, and we're going to sing like Advent's coming up. And so there's some bangers in there. And so we're going to get ready for those. And it's just, yeah. So, or like this last Sunday, the opening hymn was Thy Strong Word. And like Marie was all about that. It was hilarious. I guess in church, she was just going crazy. Like, man, this song. And I heard her singing the tune to her own made up song, right? Later Sunday. And so we sang Thy Strong Word the past couple nights. And so that's something that too, which this is a shameless little tag here. In the bulletin at St. Paul's, right, we have the upcoming hymns for the following Sunday that are in the bulletin. And especially if you use our My First Hymnal that we give out for that 4-year-old worship milestone, we include, if there are hymns that are in there, right, that they're coming up. And so we'll sometimes look at that and figure out, all right, let's get the kids ready for this. And now Arno and Evelyn, how much they pick up, it's amazing. Arno loves music, and so when he recognizes something, he's dialed in. But that's kind of how it goes. And then everybody gets hauled off to bed, and we say prayers with them as they're put down. And it's funny for Marie, like, it must be this way, in this order, for her to go to bed. And so some of our babysitters have found out quickly if you do something out of order, right? If you don't say the prayer with her, and so like we always have, I think most of our babysitters kind of know the drill. But at first, let's put out the catechism. This has the evening prayer in it, just in case. Right. But she'll get onto you if you don't do it, and so that's pretty much what it looks like. And again, variations depending on how kids cooperate. And sometimes it goes swimmingly, which is great. And other times it's just like, let's get through it, right? And get these kids in bed.
I remember those days.
Yeah.
Our bedtime routine is nothing like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's
so yours. Yeah.
Now we're in a little bit different scenario here, where we're more, our kids are a little bit older. And so my bedtime routine has become, it started like that, but now it is it is flipped. And so there are some power struggles and some dynamics that just have to be managed and held that really kind of upset the apple cart.
Sure.
And so, man, I think when we had our kids were younger, when my eldest Thea was, 4 or 5, it was very predictable. It was very, this, then this, then this. And we were going to read these Bible stories. And we did it. But as they got older, as things changed, as they had more responsibility, things have changed. And not something like it again, it's the routine and the normal is different. And I would say we have a lot more of those nights where it's a frustration sometimes, just
right.
go to bed. And it's difficult.
Get through the routine.
Just
right?
get through it. Like sometimes that happens, and like it's not their fault necessarily, but it's on me as a parent to help get it better. But it's like, yeah, we have that, and it's a battle. And I think the other side of like our bedtime routine is like when it's also going later into the evening.
Sure.
And so as parents, like, okay, my older two, they could stay up much, much later than when we put them to bed. And so they fight us on that.
Right.
And they like, why I want to do that, da, da, da. And like, there's a little bit of a power struggle there. And so like that bedtime routine is a real challenge. And so like, that's an area where at least I feel personally that I can do a better job of improving as a dad and like working on what bedtime looks like. And just, I'm like, I think the biggest thing is just having patience for my kids, like that they have needs, their needs are changing, and that, I need to be accommodating to those, even though I'm at the end of the day and I'm spent. Like, right. It's just hard. And, but at the same time though. And so like, he talks about that in the book, our author. So again, we're going through habits of the household as a group. And so last time we talked about why discipleship matters a little bit. And so like, we talked about the Lyman Stone survey. We talked about the Barna study and about how, discipleship in the home is really important. We also talked about how parents, church, and school all play a part in developing that next generation. And so again, the whole purpose of our podcast is to walk with parents through this challenge. And like, how do we get better at this? And so kind of jumping into the guts of today is like, what are habits and why do they matter? And I might be getting a little out of context here. I apologize. We're going off script already. But anyways, like, why do habits matter? And from an educational perspective, like, think about your teachers. Think about like, if you've got children at those young ages, like the first, especially when we're talking like early childhood classrooms, or we're talking about K through 5, routines. They are absolutely critical. And not to say that 6th, 7th, and 8th don't need those, but they need routines. And why do they need routines? Routines give us this ability to kind of do something on autopilot, which then frees up time for us to do other things. And these habits just get ingrained.
Right.
And that's really valuable. And so like, why are we going to focus on these habits and get ingrained in those? And this kind of leads into our next topic a little bit.
Right. And I think that's, habits, we all understand this, right? When you were learning how to ride a bicycle, you had to concentrate so hard. You were working on balance, and you're thinking, where am I steering? Also, am I pedaling well enough? All these things are taking up what your mind is doing, right?
Yeah.
And you have to focus so hard on it. But once you get it, right? Yeah. Then, well, maybe you're not focusing on it enough sometimes, right? And which driving is a similar thing, right?
Driving is very similar. Yeah.
And so when you think about some of the big habits, and going back to last time, talking about Sunday morning worship, right? Taking your family, when it is a habit that is expected, right? This is what we do.
It's the norm.
Right. Then you don't have to take up brain space on Saturday night or Sunday morning saying, are we going? Are we not? Right. And you do, and you can then focus on other things, right? Yeah. You have already made the good a habit, and you can use your brain power and decision-making energy somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. It just frees up that brain space in order to be talking about do more things. And like, let's just take the driving example a little bit more. So like, you're 16, or maybe even younger. Around here, kids can drive as early as I would imagine 14. That's when I started to drive, because I lived in a rural community. So I was able to, we lived outside of town so I could drive in. So I started learning at 14, and like just controlling the vehicle alone takes a ton of brain power.
Right.
I got to keep it between the lines. And like, it's just like, it's a constant like worry. But now, like as I'm older, or even as like, let's just fast forward a couple of years, now you're 17, 18, keeping it between the lines is much easier. You've done it enough. And so now you have brain space to think about more things like, okay, now how do I navigate around town?
Sure.
And so that, again, so the norm, I know the norm of driving. I got the basic rules. I know how to accelerate. I know how to stop. I know how to keep the car between the lines. I know how to make a left turn, a right turn, etc. Those just are on autopilot. You don't have to think about them too much unless it's out of the norm.
Sure.
And so like, yeah, that ability to develop a norm. And when I say norm, like something that's normal, what is our normal? Justin and in our book really talks about these normals, like what is our normal, and what is it about those that are normal, and do we like our normals? Like that's a really critical thing. So let's think about maybe when it comes to discipleship, what kind of normals do we need? And this brings us, and he brings up the idea of liturgy,
right,
inside of the book. So how does liturgy play into this idea of norms for our habits inside our house?
Right. And so just to kind of hit that word, right? Liturgy is kind of one of those old Latin-based words that is pretty much just used in church language usually. It literally means like the work of the people is kind of its base. And so it was used in Roman society. Sorry, this is too much. This is the church historian in me.
You're okay.
Talking about like your public service kind of, right? Yeah. But it was very focused on like for the benefit of the people, right? This is what we did for the benefit of the people. And so this was the everyday stuff, so the tax included, but just thinking about the reps, how we live our lives, the things we do for the sake of the whole. And liturgies show up anywhere there's community, really. Yeah. So how we live together. And so that's something that, yes, church liturgy is how we conduct. For us, we talk about the divine service, right? How God brings his gifts to us and we respond, and like how do we actually set all that up and order it? And that creates a pattern, and which, not to get too much, we're just in this worship study, which you were there last week. This idea that even in worship, there's this understanding that how you worship kind of forms belief. And so like as much as our worship is based in what we believe and shapes what we do, we're also looking, this pattern does something to us. How we worship focuses us on what God is doing in the most important things. And so that's why it is a churchy term that is used for that. But this goes into a much larger context, that we have all of these patterns that are shaping us, these habits and routines, which can ultimately be liturgies, right, for our lives. And we talked about this, I think, even a little bit in last episode, just like what are the things that my daughter chanting "Go Big Red," and like those sorts of liturgies that we have. This for sports, we have it for how we engage in like politics and how we do this, that, and the other, right? Even
here in the school, we have our liturgies, if you will. Car line in the morning pickup, afternoon dismissal. Those are patterns we follow. Those are kind of this liturgy that we walk through every day. And like even to like a bigger, more macro, like look at things like even some of the events we hold. Like for example, I'm excited to experience this, but like spring program, like that's going to be a liturgy in the form of things are going to happen in this order, or even the entire school year. You could look at this as there's this pattern, there's this flow, there's this liturgy to it. And that's super interesting. That when we look at it in that sense, like, yeah, all these habits and liturgies matter a ton.
And I think, so for our purposes and how Justin uses this in the book, liturgy is something that it's habit, a routine that is intentional to shape yourself, your family, right? And specifically in this context, right, in discipleship, pointed at Christ, at living in that reality. And so the beautiful thing is, wherever you have routine, wherever you have habit, you can have liturgy of some sort. And it's really just kind of looking at all these things that we've been developed into. We've had tons of reps. You talk about car line, like the first week of school for new parents and whatnot. What is going on? How does this work?
It's crazy.
Right?
It's the Wild West, right? And like, I mean, even as a new guy to this, just watching, like I intentionally asked the staff when we started, like, hey, what is car line? How does it work? I was nervous. Like I'm sitting there just like, okay, where do I got to be? And they're like, thankfully, bless his heart, Sam Moore took care of me. He said, Mr. Mueller, you stand over here, wave at people as they go by. I'm like, okay. And it worked out. He took care of me. And eventually now liturgy is going. And for those of you that are listening to this later, you're like, well, Mr. Mueller was running the show today because Mr. Bradley had to go do basketball practice, which is perfectly fine. But like, again, like coming into the new liturgies and these new patterns, that can be a challenge and takes time to acclimate to those.
Right. But then 2 months in,
and we're here.
Everybody knows the job. I mean, how it works, right? Everybody is, boom, it's flawless. Yeah. I mean, I guess you randomly have, grandma comes in and doesn't normally pick somebody up. But, I mean, everybody else knows.
We have the brain space to think about those things.
Right.
So I guess, kind of keeping the conversation moving along, we've got these patterns, we've got these liturgies. Like, where do we go next with this?
Well, and I think that's, as we look at our families and as he jumps into the book, you notice you have these patterns and you have ways that you react based on how your family flow has been formed. So, for example, right, your family, as you've changed in those bedtime routines, and you now have children that have much more a mind of their own, and you kind of have some of this pushback against mom and dad's authority, and you are so set in these ways that change becomes difficult. And when you're already tired, and already I'm experiencing this with my 3-year-old, right?
Right.
That it's like, you're challenging my authority and I'm tired at the end of the day. What is my reaction?
Yep.
How dare you?
Like, I did it. You did it. We both clenched our fists.
Right, exactly.
Like, I mean, it's so primal.
Yeah. Immediately, you just go to anger. How do you actually put them in their place, right?
Right.
And that is something that is developed in us, right? And so as you see, if that is your reaction every time, it's going to continue to be your reaction every time. You're not going to just one day be like, all right, I'm super patient tonight, out of the blue.
Well, you can certainly try.
Right.
And then what happens usually? We fall back into
it. Maybe you're good for a night, right?
Yeah, you're good for a night, and then maybe we fall back the next night.
And so with the liturgy piece, we're asking, what is this teaching our children? Like, how is this forming us as we walk together? And like, I'm sorry, this is another piece, right?
Yeah,
we're walking with you through these discipleship conversations. We use that term a lot. Like, we walk with each other. And like, that's actually a formation educational term at the time of Jesus, right? Peripateo is the Greek for to walk, right? To walk with. And that is what people did with rabbis. They followed them. They walked with, and in walking with them, experiencing life alongside, they learned from that rabbi. And so as we talk about our life as a walk with Jesus, he is walking with us, giving us reps in his love, right? And seeing that every part of our life is a part of this walk. And so as we are trying to point our kids to him and to their perfect heavenly Father, as we walk alongside them, how do we point to them even in those moments when it's just like, oh, stop it, right? How do we get reps into, all right, this is a moment for both my sanctification, but also
for
to
their
teach
benefit.
them, right? Yeah. And if you do, and you're going to lose your temper, like that's just the way it is, how do you deal with that then, right?
Yeah.
There are ways that teach them to see life and people through that lens of humility, of repentance, forgiveness, and then walking together in God's grace. And so, I mean, you have all of that, but I thought it was really interesting that as we talk about these liturgies, that he actually goes to neuroscience, right?
Right.
And so, again, this is a blend of, you have your theological pieces here, but then also there is plenty of educational research, but then neuroscience comes into play.
Science is backing this in a lot of different areas. And like, this is more than just neuroscience. This is also coming into like social sciences as well, where we are like, there's a lot of data now coming out, just like the Barna study, just like the Lyman study, supporting these things. And so I guess like the big thing, what he talked about with the neuroscience side of things is, how do we change our habits? So if we got these habits, like we got this knee-jerk reaction that when our kid fights us at bedtime, we get angry. How do I stop this? How do we change those habits? And I thought he brought up two really great points when it comes to changing habits. Yep. First of all, habits are like ruts. So like when you drive down a highway and it's an older highway, you'll notice there's like divots in the highway, and your car naturally flows into those two spots, which can be great at times. It's pretty terrible when it's raining really heavily, right? And the oil comes up, and now you can hydroplane. Or maybe it's really snowy and the ice builds up inside of that, and it's like, this isn't good. But those ruts are there, and in order to remove the ruts, it takes enormous effort to remove those ruts. And those ruts provide a purpose. And like we talked about earlier, why do we have habits in the first place? They free up space in our brain to do more complicated tasks. They free up space so that we can do routine things regularly without having to think about them.
Right.
Like tying our shoe, like riding a bicycle, like driving a car. Those are they're very valuable. And because they are developed in the way they are, and they're developed in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia, which is again, it's further down the brain stem. It's far away from that frontal cortex where that's responsible for decision making, and decision making and cause and effect reasoning and just logic.
You think about thinking, right?
Yeah, you think about thinking right here, and the basal ganglia is in the back. Is my understanding. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert, but like, so that piece there just develops these ruts, and so to change the rut, whether it be good or bad, takes enormous effort. Right. And it takes intentional effort. A lot of times they'll say that in order to develop a new habit, it takes you 21 days to develop that habit. And that's a long time to try to be working through something and develop that habit.
And if you don't believe this, do this experiment, right? For 1 hour, don't check your phone. Right. Or try to go without a cell phone, right, for a day. See how that goes, right? Because you're going to have those kind of the ghost buzzes. Like you're going to be checking, you're going to be looking, right? And that's all right here, right? We have been formed.
We've been conditioned. Yeah, you're conditioned. And like, this is I'm going down a sidetrack here a little bit, but like the companies that are building phones, the companies that are building apps know this about you. They know this about me, and they know that they can develop a device that's essentially it develops the habits in your brain.
Well, and you get into,
and then we get into all the addictive stuff, right, and dopamine hits and all that jazz. But like, I mean, that's part of developing routines,
right?
And so the better we understand how our brain develops habits, the better we can dive into how do we fight, how do we not fight or fix, but how do we change our habits to then be liturgies that then, and I think this is really kind of a neat part, become purposeful. And thinking about our core values here at the school, our fourth one is lead yourself, then others. Right. Lead yourself to have great habits that are liturgies that will then allow you to then lead others.
Right. And when, as parents, right, we become central parts of these liturgies, right? We are the ones that are leading by example. Like, that is back to last week, right? Your kids see you doing these things. That registers. I mean, that is also Proverbs, right? Right. That as we train our kids in the way to go, right, they will stay in them even in old age, right? That's something that, yes, it's scriptural wisdom, but you also see, right, is you are the one by example training your children in these things that is going to develop these ruts in good ways in their minds, right? Versus less helpful reactions and routines.
Exactly, yeah. And so again, so that's what this whole book is about: is how do we develop these new habits, and not only like what might be. And then again, these aren't prescriptive that you need to do these habits and make these changes. These are I guess I'm not quite sure the word to use. I want to say suggestion. I don't feel like that's quite right either. Maybe it's a model. Right. It's a model we can look at. This is working for somebody else. How do we apply it to our lives? And then also, how do we apply scripture to this in a way that is then beneficial, not only to ourselves, but to our kids? And so again, how do we develop those great habits? And he gives us some great ways of leading new habits. And I'm going to go open up the book. I'm looking at page 12 and 13 in the book, where he starts talking about some of these things. And so in 12 and 13, and I'll try to get these up and put them onto the screen here. But he talks about like, okay, my head thinks I want to be a patient person with my kids. And so then he breaks it down. He's got a really nice graphic here. And like, so I'm just going to go through that first one. It says, my old habit leads my heart. By default, the habit is to reprimand and for every spill, which leads to an impatient mood and constantly snapping at them. And specifically, he's talking, I want to be a patient person with my kids. Sorry, can't speak today. So when the new habit leads the heart, so when we cultivate this, we say, that's okay. Why don't you help me clean it up? And saying this paves the way to a shared cleanup process instead of another reprimand. I feel more patient because I'm practicing talking patiently.
Right.
And so, so again, just that first one, and he goes through a couple other examples. That first one really, it kind of shows it. Like, we have to first identify what is our current normal, what is our current habit we're talking about.
Right.
And then from there, identify, okay, where do we want to go? And then take baby steps there over a long period of time, because this will not happen overnight.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Shooting free throws or something like that.
Free throws.
You just shoot until it's second nature. So you know exactly what you want to do. And your body just reacts, right? Muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we do this in a lot of other ways.
Right.
But this is an issue ultimately of sanctification.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this, I would encourage as we embark on this journey, right?
Yeah, right.
To do it in prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this isn't something that we're just like, all right, y'all be better, and just kind of...
No, by no means.
Because, I mean, we're all walking along, and we're going to need a lot of forgiveness as we stumble through. But this is something that we're called to as Christians, right? As the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians, right? We're putting on a new self, right? This is a whole new way of life. And I think sometimes as Christians, we're so focused on like the thou shalt not.
Right. These rules that we need to follow.
Right. And just don't do the bad things. But like what Jesus is doing by his word and spirit is inviting us into a new way, a whole new way of being, which includes the mundane, every sort of night, frustrating bedtime routine or whatever it is. Whatever that you kind of look at, like, man, this is just a struggle every single day. Jesus is inviting us to say, all right, put that in my hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you look to me in the midst of that? And how do you point your kids to me in my love during that time? Because I want that, right? Yeah. And I will shape your whole family during that time. And again, like sanctification, which is lifelong, right? It never comes to completion until Jesus returns. Mm-hmm. This is a constant, everyday struggle, right? Yeah. As we fight against the sin that is within us and in our children, right?
Right.
And in the end, like that is why we have Jesus gives us such freedom in repentance and forgiveness.
Right. And through his sacrament, all that. And like another thing that I think he points out, which I think plays into that idea of sanctification, is he talks about the word rule. So I'm looking at page 15.
Oh, sure.
And he talks about Daniel in when they were exiled in Babylon and how they had these liturgies of like always praying, even though it was against the law. And one of the things he talks about is the Latin root for the word rule doesn't mean something you need to obey. It refers to a framework. Right. It's something to work. This is a, again, like rule, almost like a guideline, like curbs on a street, or it's a fence around a pasture or whatever. It's a framework to work with inside of. And so our habits, as we develop those habits, become this framework that guide how we act, because those routines, those most fundamental parts of our lives are going to eventually rise to the surface. Surprisingly enough, when I was coaching robotics, something that stuck with me to this day, a parent said to me, was talking with these parents. These kids were just killing it at the middle school level, just absolutely destroying the competition. And he was a former military. I don't remember which branch, but he said to me, it's not about rising to the occasion. It's about falling back on your training. And so think of it like, so if you again, what is our training here? What are we training our kids to do? We're training our kids to be Christ-like. We're training our kids to know Jesus, and by knowing Jesus, to act the way Jesus would want us to act. And so we set up that framework, and by setting up these routines and these habits, we can then inform our lives, and then again, when the hard times hit, fall back on our training, fall back on the habits. And that can lead us into, again, it's a part of that sanctification process. And I think we can see amazing results from it. I would much rather be calm and patient with my kids at bedtime. It goes 100 times better than just burst out in anger. It just does. And like, I'm not saying that every habit will make life easier, but there are some that will be beneficial.
Or on those times where that will inevitably happen, where you do burst out in anger, how do you proceed, right?
Yeah.
Because your children are the same sort of sinful, the same sort of human, right? And so if they see their parents owning up, hey, that was not okay, right? I'm sorry, will you forgive me, right? And a reminder of that was not what you should have seen, right? I'm not perfect, and I love you, and I'll always love you no matter what, right?
Right.
That having that reinforcement then shows them how to live, right? As we're being formed together, like that's what the walk is.
Yes.
As we walk with our children, because we're all being, I think he has a little section in there, we're all being parented by God, right?
Yeah.
All of us. And having that understanding that we aren't alone, right? God is the one who is parenting us. And I think that that's probably a foundational point for this too, that as we think about our children, why do we do this? Why do we go through all of this? Well, because it's Christ's work in us, but because we have our children on loan, right?
Absolutely. Can I tell you something scary on that one? Back in Omaha, before we took this call here, my wife looked at me one morning when we were going to school, and she said to me, Matt, Dorothea, like there's less time between from now into when she will leave to go to college than from when she was born till now. We were more than halfway through. She had turned 9.
Right.
And like just basic math. And we were like, wow, that blew my mind. And like, you're right. We have them on loan. We only have them for a certain amount of time. And eventually they're going to be, just from society alone, they're going to be released to where they need to be adults.
Right.
And Lord willing, and I pray this for everyone that is listening to this, pray for everyone in our school, everyone in our church body, everyone around the world, that I pray that they can be young Christian men and women who know Jesus and know their Savior.
Right.
And that is not an easy task.
Right. Well, we had a long conversation with Marie, and she's 3, right? So sometimes I don't know why we do this, but just this idea that she has a father in God, right? And so that I'm her earthly daddy, right? But she has a perfect father in God who's always there, who is her perfect ultimate father, right? And just kind of the wheels turning there, and just kind of that understanding that always hits me, that it's like, she's not ultimately mine, right? God has given me this vocation, this opportunity to be her earthly father. And the most important thing in that is pointing her to Jesus, right? To her ultimate father. And it's interesting. I think, throw off the 8th grade confirmation students, right? As we talk about, what should a parent want for their kid? Yeah. And, people say, well, happiness or whatever, or to be successful or to use their gifts really well. And I'm just like, okay, so none of those things are bad. But like, ultimately, if I have to choose one, it's that my kids die a faithful death, right? That they know Jesus, that they know him as Lord and Savior when they draw their last breath. Like, that is my goal for my children. Now, I hope that there's all sorts of other great things in their lives too, but
if we can only pick one.
Right. And so if that is actually it should be, as a parent, our greatest desire for them. How do we use every opportunity we have? Right. So that's...
And so really, like, this whole book is going to help us think about how do we take advantage of those moments we don't even think about.
Right. And then as we have our reps, as we create these liturgies, right, then we won't have to think about them as much, right?
Yep.
They'll just be there, and they'll be shaping our children, our family, and ourselves, right? Yeah.
And that's what we want to do in this book. So again, we're reading Habits of the Household by Justin Whitmell Early. And so what we just went through there was part 1, kind of like that chapters 1, 2, I guess you could say.
Yep.
So the next time we meet, we're going to be talking about waking. And so, like, what does our morning routine look like? I'm excited to get into that one with you.
Yep.
And talk about what our waking routines is. And like, some of us are morning people, some of us are evening people. It's going to be fun to kind of dive through what can that look like? Maybe some models. How can we do this well? And then again, how can we reclaim those moments we don't even think about?
Right.
Not only for ourselves, but for the Holy Spirit to sanctify us through. It's really so.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Can't wait. Thank you again for joining us on the Teaching the Faith podcast at home, or Teaching the Faith at Home podcast. I got that all mixed up. We'll work on it. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on Spotify, please like, subscribe, share us with your friends. More content coming your way. Thank you. Have a great evening.